Now, I am in the financial district in Manhattan today, and I'm going to a place where our country has some of its original origins and was the first meeting place for the U.S. Congress. Today, I am at Federal Hall. So what you see here is actually a replica of a printing press from the colonial times. And the printing press with local gazettes would actually spread the word around in secret about patriot causes or patriot events or protests that were being planned for such and such a time. So freedom of the press, which was a very big deal and very prominent in essentially undercutting the British effort during the Revolutionary War. Now, I only have a small idea of how the original printing press would have worked. I know it involved pedals and it involved a lot of moving parts, and essentially it involved engraving plates, which you would build the story on the engraving plate. And then this right here, you would blot the entire wide end. So obviously opposite end of the handle. You would blot that whole thing with ink, put it over the engraving plate, and you would essentially press the paper against the engraving plate, which would create the Gazette or local newspaper for the day. In 1788, the building was officially renamed Federal Hall, and George Washington is elected as the very first president of the United States. John Adams was elected as his vice president, and George Washington was sworn in on the second floor balcony. On March 4th, 1789, the very first session of the very first U.S. Congress was held. This is depicting George Washington's inauguration there on the second floor balcony. The one thing I love about these models is, one, just how intricate they are, and two, to a certain extent, it really does paint a picture of what George Washington's inauguration would have looked like for the times. I'm sure there would have been a lot more people, but gives you a pretty rough and basic understanding of what it looked like. Now, in July of 1790, it is agreed upon in Congress that the U.S. National Capitol should be built next to the Potomac River, and a temporary capital should be voted on. Philadelphia is chosen to be the temporary capital until 1800. And here they have the presidential oath, which you can see here. And let me know down in the comments, it seems like obviously in today's world, the role or position of the President of the United States is not a well-respected one among, I would say, just the general public. Let me know down in the comments of when do you think people stopped respecting the office of the presidency. So the president's New York home in 1789 was the Franklin House, located on Cherry Street near today's Brooklyn Bridge. During that very first session, the Department of War was created, which is now the Department of Defense. The other departments that were created that first day were Departments of Treasury and the Department of Foreign Affairs, which is now the Department of State. Now, this is not Washington's actual desk when he was president, obviously. This is a replica. Now, on September 25th, 1789, Congress proposes 12 amendments to the Constitution to be ratified by the states. Out of the 12 amendments, 10 were ratified by the states, which in turn became known as the Bill of Rights. Now, this is the actual piece of stone from the second floor balcony where George Washington stood and took the oath of the very first president of the United States. Now, whoever had the foresight to say, you know what, that stone, that whole stone, balcony, we should keep that, man deserves a raise. Now, after the Congress moved to Philadelphia, Federal Hall became the custom house for the Port of New York. Importers would come into this rotunda and conduct their business at one of the numerous desks. And the desks would have been set off in different, essentially, for the lack of a better term, corners of this rotunda. By borrowing architectural features from the ancient world, Americans developed a grand public architecture of their own, representing the values of democracy and inspiring national pride. And that is the description of when they first constructed the rotunda here at Federal Hall, which you see now. I love these old photos. It gives you such an insight to the status level, if you will, of George Washington's inauguration. Even 100 years later, this is where this picture is from 100 years later. So you get the feel of the level of importance of these types of events. Unveiling of John Quincy Adams Ward's statue of George Washington on Evacuation Day. And Evacuation Day, for those who didn't know, that is the day that the British evacuated from New York City. Now, this building started as Federal Hall, and then it became a custom house for the Port of New York. And in May of 1862, it became a Subtreasury building. The building would go on to house gold and silver and coinage, with vaults of silver and gold in the upper floors were turned into an armory with fortified positions on the roofs. So this is, I have to assume, only one of the safes from the Subtreasury building days here. And my only thought when I see this is not from a historical aspect, but I would have thought it would have been bigger. Now that is a clock that will give you 24 hours of freedom. Picture was taken here in 1965, almost 200 years after President Washington was inaugurated, and the woman in this photo is unknown. So if you're ever in Manhattan and you want a good dose of George Washington history, as well as just the history of this building of Federal Hall, you should stop on by to Federal Hall and check this place out. If you're not into the history, I will say the architecture alone is enough to get you inside here. Remember to smash that subscribe button and give the episode a like, and I will see you all next week at the same time, same day, same channel.